What's up, fellow wanderers, and welcome to a new video series that is going to be all about my explorations and experiences in Calgary, Alberta. And with so many things to do and experience in the greater Calgary area, I decided to make the first video in this video series about the Glenbow Museum. As I've always had an interest in history, I was going down to Calgary, we were going to the Glenbow, I was like, hey, might as well film the Glenbow. So, the first gallery that I'm taking in is Mavericks, an incorrigible history of Alberta, which is an exhibit designed to let you meet some of the fascinating people who shaped the history of Alberta. This dynamic gallery tells our province's history through the stories of 48 Mavericks, men and women who shaped Alberta with their ingenuity, ambition, and adventurous spirit. Mavericks offers an experience of what it means to be Albertan. I really wanted to see this exhibit at the Glenbow, as it showcases Albertan history in a way I never really considered it. As even from the beginning of the exhibit, I realized I was in for a real treat, as even the gathering area has so much to take in with references to Calgary's history, with the old Telstar drugstore sign being prominently displayed. I references this area to the Hall of Remembrance. With all these photographs on the wall, it makes you realize that you have a legacy to live up to as an Albertan. I took a quick duck into a portrayal of a diner and sat down taking in the advertisements on the wall and just absorbing the aura of the portrayal of the diners. I felt it was interesting to feel an aura of welcome and home emanating from this part of the exhibit. And I just found it fascinating. The number of original photographs in this part of the exhibit is staggering, as it makes you realize that history is full of real people whose real lives happened and affected the history of Alberta in the process, and why history is important in the telling of stories. Now, coming on to how the railway impacted the history of Alberta portion, I really enjoyed this section in the Glenbow, as it made it feel as though you're actually on a passenger train traveling through the Rockies, and I found it quite interesting as I learned about the impact that the railway had on Western Canadian history last semester. So it allowed me to analyze this portion of Mavericks for historical correctness. I found it fascinating, as the lighting was reminiscent of what one would expect from traveling on a train at the turn of the century. But I've never personally traveled by rail, but I'm planning to. But it was fascinating. Deciding where to go here in Mavericks next, I decided to cover this little exhibit that seems to be about Indigenous Mavericks who contributed to Albertan history. I found it interesting, as they were here long before our European ancestors, and entering a teepee, which in itself is an interesting way to enter the next portion of the exhibit, as I have been in other teepees, such as the ones at Rocky Mountain House, National Historic Site of Canada, and Fort Normandeau in Red Deer. Click the card if you want to watch the Rocky Mountain House video, and I am planning on filming a Fort Normandeau video in the near future for the all about Red Deer. Things to do in Alberta, the Red Deer video series. Never mind. Yeah. I also learned about the fur trade last semester, so it provided a sort of a tying of loose ends, if you will. Now I believe I am in the Policing Mavericks portion with a recording telling the story of a young Northwest Mounted Police recruit and his views of the Canadian West, which made it for an interesting listen for someone who studied the Northwest Mounted Police last semester. Now we have moved on to the New Sun Gallery of Aboriginal Art and Culture, which is meant to let you discover the stories of Canada's first inhabitants, from the northern beauty of Inuit carvings to the intricacy of Plains quillwork and distinctive designs created by Northwest Coast peoples. Enjoy an authentic glimpse into the diversity of First Peoples traditional culture. I found this gallery to be of interest to me, as I studied a lot of different First Peoples culture last semester, and the artifacts on display are amazing. From the Nakota headdress that is intricately woven to include eagle feathers and glass beads, to the various Inuit artifacts, including a kayak and soapstone artwork, and also the various pieces of Haida artwork, including a canoe and traditional woven cedar hat, which allow me to connect with what I learned. Personally, I think the New Sun Gallery of Aboriginal Art was one of my favorites, as it allowed me to fully understand how art and culture are an important part of Indigenous people's day-to-day life. Now I've moved on to the Our Way of Life Gallery, which is a gallery that is supposed to be a way for a foreign person to the Blackfoot way of life to uncover the traditions, values, and history of the people who have lived for thousands of years in the northwestern plains of Alberta and Montana. This portion of the third floor was ingenious in how the different stories were told, from the presentation of the culture to the legends presented in the Sky Stories area. It really drove home the point to me that we have so much to learn about our Indigenous friends' past to understand their culture. Now I'm just kind of thinking, where do I go from here? As noted before, the Glenbow has so much to discover that it can't be fully covered in a single day at the Glenbow. So you have to come back multiple times to really appreciate and understand how the different exhibits are interconnected and just how the stories are portrayed. Now I'm on the fourth floor, so I've now just decided to cover the West African culture exhibit first, with Mineralogy and Warriors exhibit coming later. It was quite interesting to see the different art forms and how each art form was crafted individually, despite the art in here not being used, crafted with any implements such as chisels or anything like that. It was awe-inspiring to look at these different art forms, like these tiki figures. Like, I don't know what they were used for, but I just found it awe-inspiring just to look at them, like, and experience the West African culture. It was amazing just to, like, kind of, like, wander through this exhibit and, like, soak in the atmosphere and just look at what these artworks meant to these cultures. Like, in a lot of these cultures have disappeared, with globalization being a huge factor, but we have the artifacts to continue to tell these stories from these long-departed cultures. And with that quote from Nelson Mandela on the wall, it just ties it in perfectly. Now I have moved on to the Mineralogy exhibit, which was interesting just by the number of different samples of minerals that the Glenbow has on display for the public's enjoyment. Personally, I love the calcite collection as it was so shiny, but it made me realize that it took thousands, if not millions, of years for these different shapes of minerals to be formed in such a way. I love learning about minerals, as even when I was a young boy, I was interested in them. I have always wanted to grow minerals in my home. I've always wanted to, like, go out looking for rocks, discovering different types of minerals, like even growing geoids. I did that with a friend of mine for a science project, and it was always fascinating to see how long it would take for these guys to form. I think this was the calcite collection, maybe, and as you can see, it just the shininess, it's what really drives it home for me. I think this is calcite. Yeah, just the shininess is what drew me in to look at these guys. And I just love just how long it took for a simple beauty to be formed. I think these are geoids. Yeah, if you look here, just look at that purple one there. Yeah, those are definitely geoids. And I just found it interesting just to walk through this exhibit and have a look. I think over here, no, these are more I think these are more calcites. Yeah, those are definitely calcites. The ones at the bottom. Yeah, those are the big examples of calcites. More of these minerals. It just makes me want to go out to someplace in southern Alberta and dig for uh minerals. These guys, like that one right there. Like, look at that. Look at the coloring, and it's amazing, isn't it? And now I believe, no, not yet. These are just uh, more minerals. Like that. That one really caught my attention right there. The one that's kind of multicolored. Like, I just found it quite interesting. I think over here, yeah, petrified wood, which is Alberta's official stone, and it's been found many times. So that's why it's Alberta's official stone. No other reason. And here is amylite, which is Canada's official gemstone, and it is used extensively in jewelry such as pendants, and those pendants that have amylite in it are expensive. So yeah, it's obvious why. Artwork and jewelry made from precious minerals was up next, and it really got me thinking about the level of craftsmanship that was put into each individual piece, as the level of detail was astonishing. Moving on to the precious stones section, I was personally amazed at all the different types of precious stones, many of which I'd never heard of. Being a guy born in April myself, I only knew that diamond was a girl's best friend, so I was quite ignorant. Moving on, I am now looking down from above the Sky Stories area in the Our Way of Life gallery, and it just astounded me how they animated all the different stories, and I'm kind of nerdy like that. And finally, I've moved on to the Warriors exhibit, which is an exhibit covering 5 centuries of warfare, tactics, weaponry, and protection, or as how the Glenbow puts it, almost every society has engaged in warfare at some point during its history. This exhibition compares cultural approaches to war and to the people who do the fighting. First Nations of the Plains, Maoris, Samurai, medieval Europeans, and contemporary society are featured in this eclectic and stimulating presentation. And I found all the stuff that they put on display fascinating. Like the samurai suit armor, I just found it, oh my gosh, I just found it fascinating. To the helmet worn by the samurai, look at that, it's even got a mustache. To the that British suit of armor, look at this, the medals, those are what men wore or women wore to signify that they've done great things during their service. And this katana, I've always wanted to learn how to forge one of these guys. It just makes me feel like, oh yes, please let me learn how to forge one of these. And over here, I believe, is Canadian military uniforms. Look at the different insignias. I believe one of those was a patch for rank. I think over here might be Royal Canadian Navy uniforms, if I'm not mistaken. Over here, Nazi Germany ensign, white ensign of Great Britain, as Canada was not a nation during World War II. It was still under the rule of Britain, but it still had liberties. And now we have moved on to the castle portion of the exhibit, with this being a suit of armor. I just always found medieval Europe interesting as I studied medieval Europe during middle school. I've also taken several medieval history courses during college, and here is what a knight would call it to his vigil before making his vow to serve king and country. Look at this. Look how long these suits of armor have lasted. It's amazing. They've lasted for centuries. It shows the quality of construction. And here's I think more suits of armor and protection. I believe, yeah, more of that. I think this is Maori. Yeah, that's Maori right there. And now we have moved into tactics and weaponry. This is a diorama of, I believe, the Battle of Crécy, which under supplied English longbowman army defeated a huge French army. Look it up if you have the time. It's fascinating. I just found all the weapons that have been used through the centuries. Fascinating. Like, look at that. Look at the halberds and another katana. Like, makes me want to, like, go out and go make one or something like that. I personally found the artifacts from the Samurai of Japan to be fascinating, as I always wanted to learn how to forge a samurai sword. Anyways, well, Wanderers, I hopefully made this an enjoyable experience for you for this wander. If you did give this video a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and hopefully you guys get down to Calgary and wander through history. And with that being said, wander out, get on down to Calgary, and thanks for watching. Good night.